Welcome to This Day in His Story, created by American Heritage Worldwide. A reminder that every day holds something new to learn. Did you know that an oxygen tank exploded just 2 days into the Apollo 13 mission to the moon, turning it into an emergency situation with the words, "Houston, we've had a problem." Learn how the astronauts survived in freezing temperatures while drinking only 6 ounces of water each day before the spacecraft re-entered the Earth's atmosphere at 25,000 miles per hour. Discover how the astronauts used the lunar module as a lifeboat after the parachutes deployed perfectly, allowing the crew to land safely in the Pacific Ocean. Discover that the Apollo 13 mission was classified as a successful failure because of the experience gained in rescuing and returning both the astronauts and the space module.
Imagine you're just falling through the vacuum of space, right?
Yeah.
At like 25,000 miles per hour.
Oh yeah, terrifying.
Right. And your spaceship has plummeted to 38 degrees Fahrenheit. You are shivering so violently that you literally can't sleep. You're, severely dehydrated.
And your only hope of survival hinges on, a piece of cardboard and some duct tape.
Exactly. Cardboard, duct tape, and trying to force a square peg into a round hole.
Our mission today is to really unpack the historical records, the mission transcripts, and those post-flight reports of Apollo 13.
Yeah, to figure out how a routine trip to the lunar surface became one of the most desperate struggles for survival in human history.
It really is the ultimate case study, isn't it?
It absolutely is. I mean, it's what happens when the absolute mathematical precision that we just expect from space travel violently collides with the unpredictable reality of physics and, human error. Right. And today actually marks the anniversary of the launch, April 11th, 1970. It was supposed to be NASA's third lunar landing, heading for the Fra-Mauro region of the moon.
Right, but the cracks in the foundation actually started well before the rockets even fired.
Okay, let's unpack this because the pre-flight drama really highlights that tension between rigid planning and just chaotic reality.
Oh, for sure.
You have Commander Jim Lovell and lunar module pilot Fred Haise, and they have trained for thousands of hours with Ken Mattingly as their command module pilot.
They know each other's rhythms, reflexes, everything.
Exactly. But then, just days before launch, there's a last-minute twist. A backup pilot, Charles Duke, accidentally exposes the whole astronaut office to the German measles.
Which is just wild to think about.
Right. I mean, think about it like this. Imagine training for thousands of hours for the ultimate road trip only to get bumped at the very last second because a backup coworker accidentally exposed the whole office to an illness. Mattingly had no immunity.
Yeah, so NASA pulls him,
Yeah.
and Jack Swigert is literally thrown into the seat at the 11th hour.
It's just such a crazy juxtaposition.
It really is. You have this agency preparing to conquer the grand cosmic dangers of the lunar vacuum, and a mundane childhood illness forces a critical personnel swap.
It totally shatters the illusion that everything can be perfectly controlled.
Exactly. It foreshadowed a mission where absolutely nothing would go according to plan. I mean, it forced a crew that had trained as an integrated organism to suddenly accommodate a new vital organ under immense pressure.
Setting the stage for one of history's greatest survival stories. But to understand why the impending disaster was so catastrophic, we really have to look at the anatomy of the spacecraft.
Yeah, because we tend to picture a spaceship as just a single vehicle, right? Like an airplane.
Right, exactly. But the Apollo stack was highly compartmentalized, distinct modules doing completely non-interchangeable things.
The architecture is crucial here. So you have the command module, named Odyssey, which was the crew's pressurized living quarters.
And that's the only part equipped with the heat shield for re-entry, right?
Right, exactly. That is vital. And attached to its nose was the lunar module, Aquarius, which is basically a specialized elevator designed solely to ferry 2 men down to the moon and back up.
Okay. And then behind the command module is the workhorse, the service module.
Yeah, and this isn't just a utility closet. It is the lifeblood of the entire spacecraft. It houses the primary oxygen tanks, propulsion systems, and most importantly, the fuel cells.
So day 1 and 2 pass smoothly, everything seems fine. But then, 56 hours into the flight, on the evening of April 13, the crew is running routine system checks.
Just normal stuff.
Right. Swigert flips a switch to stir the cryogenic oxygen tanks in the service module, And then
A massive explosion violently rocks the entire spacecraft.
the mission transcript from that exact moment is so chilling to read, mostly because of how completely deadpan the delivery is.
Oh, they are so calm.
It's eerie. Fred Haise starts the transmission like, "Okay, Houston," but Lovell interrupts him and just says, "I believe we've had a problem here."
And Mission Control asks him to repeat it.
Yeah, and Lovell confirms, "Houston, we've had a problem. We've had a main B-bus undervolt."
Which, an undervolt sounds like a minor electrical glitch, maybe a blown fuse.
All right, I was going to ask about that. Why does an undervolt equal a death sentence in this context?
Because in the context of the Apollo service module, it is literally the sound of the ship's heart stopping.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The fuel cells I mentioned earlier, they don't just act like batteries. They actively generate electricity by combining hydrogen and oxygen. And the byproduct of that chemical reaction is breathable oxygen and drinking water.
So when an oxygen tank explodes and bleeds out into the vacuum of space, you aren't just losing air to breathe.
Exactly. You are immediately suffocating the fuel cells. Without oxygen, the chemical reaction stops.
So the main B-bus undervolt meant the spacecraft was rapidly hemorrhaging its ability to produce power.
Precisely. And without power, there is no circulation, no thermal control, no life support. Within a matter of hours, the Odyssey command module, which remember is their only ticket home, was completely dead.
So they can't go to the moon anymore. The mission instantly transforms into a frantic race against time just to get back to Earth.
Yeah, and the focus shifts seamlessly down to Houston.
Right, to Flight Director Gene Kranz.
Gene Kranz looking at telemetry that tells him his crew is in a decaying tin can hundreds of thousands of miles away.
And his leadership here really sets the tone for the ground response. I mean, his quote is legendary. He says to his team, "I've never lost an American in space. This crew is coming home. You've got to believe it. Your team must believe it. And we must make it happen."
It gives you chills. His leadership was all about forcing the best minds on Earth to look past the overwhelming impossibility of it all.
So break it down.
Exactly. Break it down into sequential, actionable engineering problems.
And the first immediate problem is the one-shot plan, getting the crew out of the dying command module.
Right. They had to abandon Odyssey, power up the lunar module Aquarius, and use it as a lifeboat.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Aquarius was built to sustain 2 men for a 2-day lunar excursion. Now it has to sustain 3 men for a 4-day journey.
Yeah. The math just does not work in their favor.
It's like your house losing power during a deadly blizzard. Right. And you're forced to survive for days in a tiny backyard shed that was only built for a quick afternoon project.
That's a great analogy.
All while trying to jury-rig the air vents so you don't suffocate. Because this brings us to the famous scrubber problem. I just have to ask, for an agency that plans for every conceivable failure, how does NASA end up with incompatible air filtration systems?
Oh, it's classic government contracting. The command module was built by North American Rockwell, and they designed a system that used square lithium hydroxide canisters to scrub the deadly carbon dioxide.
Square canisters. Oh,
Right. But the lunar module was built by Grumman, and those engineers designed a system that used round canisters.
So you have 3 astronauts exhaling CO2 into a tiny sealed cabin. The round scrubbers are rapidly being depleted.
And they have a massive stockpile of square scrubbers sitting useless in the dead command module.
Because they physically cannot plug them into the round holes of the lunar module system.
Exactly. And CO2 buildup is insidious. Before you suffocate, you experience extreme lethargy, confusion, impaired judgment.
Which is the absolute last thing you want when you were trying to manually fly a damaged spaceship.
Oh, 100%. So down in Houston, engineers basically dump a box of miscellaneous gear onto a table. The exact same gear the astronauts have on board.
Right, like flight manuals, plastic bags, spacesuit hoses, and of course duct tape.
Good old duct tape. They figure out a sequence to build a makeshift adapter, test it, and then literally read the instructions up to the crew step by step.
And it works. The crew builds it, attaches the square canister to the round hole using the hose and tape, and the CO2 levels drop.
It's an incredible fix. But breathing is only the first hurdle. They also have to solve the trajectory problem.
Because when the explosion happened, Apollo 13 was not on a free return trajectory.
Right. And a free return trajectory is a very specific path that uses the moon's gravity to automatically sling the spacecraft back toward Earth.
So to picture this, think of a skateboarder dropping into a massive half pipe. If you enter at the exact right angle and speed, The curvature of the ramp naturally launches you up and out the other side.
But if your speed or angle is off by even a fraction, you just slam into the wall or you fly over the lip and crash.
Exactly. The crew had to execute a burn to speed up and correct their angle to hit that free return trajectory.
But they couldn't use the massive main engine on the damaged service module. Firing it might cause a secondary explosion,
which would just blow the ship to pieces.
Yeah, so this forced them to strategically fire the descent engine of the lunar module several times.
And that engine was designed for a slow, gentle descent in low gravity, not to push the massive dead weight of the entire Apollo stack through deep space.
And the margin for error was virtually non-existent. The Earth's atmosphere from space is incredibly thin. They had to hit an entry corridor roughly 2 degrees wide.
Because if they come in too steep, the friction incinerates them.
Right. And if they come in too shallow, they literally bounce off the atmosphere like a rock skipping across a pond and fly off into a permanent solar orbit.
Which is just a terrifying thought. And the physical execution of this plan enduring that 4-day journey is a brutal test of human endurance.
Oh, absolutely. Having a theoretical plan is one thing. Living it is another.
Because to save critical power for the navigation computers, they had to shut everything else down, including the heat.
And the deep freeze is horrifying. Outside the spacecraft, it's 280 degrees below zero.
Wow.
Yeah. And inside the cabin, the temperature plummeted to roughly 38 degrees Fahrenheit.
You're freezing.
And they're wearing light jumpsuits designed for a climate-controlled environment, not Arctic survival. The condensation from their breath froze solid on the walls. They shivered so constantly that sleep was impossible.
And compounding all of that is the dehydration. Water became the ultimate scarcity.
Because the fuel cells were gone.
Right. Each man is restricted to drinking just 6 ounces of water per day.
6 ounces?
And the physical toll is massive. They lose a combined total of 31.5 pounds. Fred Haise gets a severe kidney infection. But wait, I have to ask. I was looking at the source material, and they are floating in a freezing tin can, severely dehydrated, losing weight rapidly. But the records say they never complained.
No, not really.
How is that humanly possible?
What's fascinating here is their psychological profile. I mean, these were highly experienced test pilots who felt incredibly honored to be chosen.
Right.
Their whole careers were built on intense discipline. The ability to separate physical misery from the tasks required to fly the aircraft.
Because complaining expends vital energy and oxygen.
Exactly. Panic clouds judgment. Extreme discipline overrode their physical misery. They knew their only path to survival lay in intense focus on the next checklist item.
That is just uncompromising focus. But surviving the transit back to Earth is really only the prologue to the most terrifying phase of the mission.
Re-entry. Slamming back into the atmosphere at mind-boggling speeds.
Right. On April 17th, they have to transfer back into the frozen, dead command module and jettison the lunar module that kept them alive.
But the command module was completely without power. It had been in a deep freeze for days.
So they have to somehow boot up the computers and trigger the pyrotechnics to separate the modules. But the batteries in the command module are strictly for the parachutes.
Right. If they use the chute batteries to boot the computers, they crash into the ocean.
So Houston engineers devised this wild procedure to reverse wire the spacecraft. They take power from the lunar module's batteries and trickle charge it backwards through the umbilical cables.
It was a totally untested procedure, written on the fly, and they're pushing power into a system covered in frozen condensation.
A single short circuit would end it all. But miraculously, the Odyssey powers up. They jettison the service module, and for the first time, they see an entire panel has been blown completely off.
Which really showed them how close they came.
Then they jettison the Aquarius, strap in, and hit the atmosphere at 25,000 miles per hour.
The aerodynamics of that generate an envelope of superheated plasma, pushing temperatures to thousands of degrees.
And that creates the communication blackout.
Right. Normally it lasts about 3 minutes, but for Apollo 13, it's stretched on.
The seconds are just ticking by. 3 minutes, 4 minutes. Houston is getting nothing but static.
The silence must have been agonizing.
The crew later described looking out the window, and the sky turned from an angry red to a soft pink to blue, raining charred material past the windows.
And then finally, the radio crackled. The parachutes popped. They floated down like a feather, landing safely in the Pacific Ocean at 1:07 p.m. EST.
The world had been glued to their TVs, praying for that exact moment.
Oh, absolutely. But NASA didn't just celebrate. They immediately got to work.
Right. The flight controllers finished their post-flight reports in just 3 days, instead of the usual 3 months.
Because the Apollo 13 Review Board spent 2 months investigating. They wanted the brutal truth. This wasn't just a statistical fluke.
Like signs had been ignored, right?
Yeah. Let's look at the failure mechanism. The oxygen tank had an internal stirring fan, and the wiring was coated in Teflon insulation.
Okay.
During a pre-flight test weeks before launch, they couldn't drain liquid oxygen from that tank. So to speed it up, they used the internal heaters to boil it out.
Oh, wow. Boil it out.
Yeah. But the thermal switches that were supposed to prevent overheating had been swapped during an upgrade from a 28-volt system to a 65-volt system.
So the switches couldn't handle the voltage.
Exactly. They melted shut. The internal temperature of the tank soared to over 1,000 degrees, completely frying the Teflon insulation off the wires.
But because it was inside a sealed metal tank, nobody could see the damage.
Right. They filled it with liquid oxygen, installed it, and launched it.
So when Swigert flipped the switch 56 hours in, electricity surged through exposed wires in a high-pressure environment of pure oxygen.
It created a spark. The damaged Teflon ignited, the pressure spiked, and boom! The tank blew the side off the spacecraft.
The board explicitly concluded it resulted from, quote, an unusual combination of mistakes, coupled with a somewhat deficient and unforgiving design.
It's a sobering admission. Human error was baked into the hardware before it ever left the pad.
So the From-Marrow site goes to Apollo 14, and Apollo 13 goes down in history as a successful failure. It even inspired the 1994 book Lost Moon and the 1995 Tom Hanks movie, which, by the way, got 9 Academy Award nominations and won Best Film Editing and Best Sound.
Very well deserved.
But so what does this all mean? How can a mission plagued by mistakes and an unforgiving design simultaneously be remembered as one of NASA's proudest moments?
Well, the true triumph wasn't the hardware, right? The hardware failed. The triumph was the human element. The countless hours of preparation that allowed them to pivot when everything went wrong.
They survived because they understood the underlying mechanics of their ship.
Exactly. The training didn't prepare them for the exact explosion, but it gave them the profound understanding necessary to rewrite the rules of physics and engineering on the fly.
That is incredible. And it perfectly leads into a powerful quote from President Thomas S. Monson to anchor our deep dive today. He said, "When the time for decision arrives, the time for preparation is past."
That is so true here.
Right. I mean, think about the thousands of hours of training that saved the Apollo 13 crew. The reverse wiring, the trajectory burns, the duct tape scrubbers. So in your own life, how are you preparing for your own sudden emergencies?
When your own main B-bus undervolt hits.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When that moment hits, will you have already shared and discussed your contingency plans with your own crew of family and friends? Because when the explosion happens, the time for preparation is already gone. Just something to mull over.
Thank you for joining us for this day in his story. May the lessons of yesterday inspire you to see God's hand today and to play your part in his story now. For more faith-based learning, visit ahsworldwide.org, the homeschool for faith and family.